Warning! The following episode of Blatant Filler contains some coarse language. Viewer discretion is advised. Additionally, we will be covering heavy amounts of spoilers for the following series, so you may want to have watched the following series before listening to this podcast episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Blatant Filler. I'm one of the hosts, JJ, and I'm joined by my fellow co-host, Adam.
Hello.
Collin.
Hi there.
And Tyler.
Hey!
Okay, so this week we will be looking at a smash hit from Studio Trigger called Kill la Kill.
Kill la Kill is, well, JJ already mentioned it's from Studio Trigger, but it was licensed for an American release by Aniplex of America. It's an action comedy drama Shounen show that aired from October 13th, 2013 to March 27th, 2014. It was awesome. It had 24 episodes, and later on we got an OVA. The director is a guy named Hiroyuki Imaishi, and it was written by Kazuki Nakashima. Composer was Hiroyuki Sawano, and that's part of why the soundtrack is absolutely amazing. And it wasn't actually based on anything else. It was an original work for anime that later got adapted into a manga, sort of the reverse of the usual trend.
Now that we have the description out of the way, let's go into story, plot, and setting about this series. So, what's the notable thing about this series? Well, it takes something as mundane as clothing and puts a heavy emphasis on it.
Yeah, and it's absolutely insane.
So let's talk about how the series starts off. It starts off with some teacher we don't know giving a history lesson on the Nazis and Hitler. And that's our first introduction to the series. But it also, well, next, and then immediately followed by that, we are introduced to a gigantic character barging in and basically telling the teacher off and looking for a traitor. And of course, we start learning about these Goku uniforms, which are basically the uniforms these characters wear that give them power.
I would also like to point out that the big guy who interrupts the teacher's lesson, his name is Ira Gamaguri, and he proceeds to murder someone right in front of everybody.
And that is why it's called Kill la Kill.
The history lesson is in no way symbolic. No way.
No, I mean, it's totally not. Totally not.
It-
Until you meet Satsuki and realize that, hey, she's the evil queen that rules over everyone in this.
Literally Hitler.
Literally Hitler. At this
But with a
academy
nicer
known
rack.
as Hanoji. He has a nicer rack than Hitler.
Well, arguably, but
I mean, you could make the case otherwise, but your wife would shit.
I think that would be a great episode title. Satsuki has a nicer rack than Hitler.
So that's the one thing I found interesting about this series is, despite how stupid it is, it has a lot of symbolism in it.
Yeah, it's totally stupid symbolism, though.
Yeah,
Well,
it's totally stupid symbolism.
Vulgarity and idiotic humor has never been a disqualification for something being clever, satirical, or meaningful.
Yeah,
But-
so that's big thing about Kill la Kill is how it's supposed to be a satire of the shonen battle genre.
But yeah, there is actually quite a lot of symbolism, especially with how Satsuki is always looking down on everyone from above, more along the lines of mentally as well. But usually you see her when she's on a higher plane than everyone else, looking down. And then of course she always refers to the people below her as pigs in human clothing.
Gotta love that subtle Japanese literary.
Just little stuff like that, and as well as sort of clothing being the original sin with Ragyo later on and such, and just a lot of symbolism. But let's be honest, this is a very fan servicey series.
Very.
Yeah, if you have definitely not a series you should go into if you have heavy issues with fan service in shows.
That said,
I would actually almost disagree with that, just because I'm somebody who usually does have issues with fan service in shows. It totally turns me off from watching something. But Kill la Kill was extremely enjoyable to me.
Well, one of the differences between this show and something that we would normally consider fan servicey is that in the name itself, fan servicey implies that it's just there as kind of extra stuffing, is just, whereas in Kill la Kill it actually serves to further the parodic undertones of the series, and it actually has a point beyond just being fan service. It still is what it is, but when there's a meaning for it, it doesn't feel as degrading, demeaning, take your pick.
Yeah. Me personally, I have these 4 golden rules of good fan service, I like to call them. Basically, they are: a series must not entirely take itself seriously. The fan service must serve some reason other than just being random fan service. Fan service must be equal opportunistic to both male and female characters, and the fan service must have some kind of fun and comedic tint to it, which Kill la Kill actually passes quite swimmingly.
Yeah,
I don't agree with all those rules, but in general, yeah.
There is a lot of equal opportunity fan service.
Yeah, with nudist speech, which we will get into later on, but let's just say glowing purple tits. But what are your guys' some thoughts on the overall plot?
The plot is probably the least relevant thing in the entire show. If you're watching this show for the plot, you're like, what are you doing? This show is basically pure fun, and don't expect any sort of deep story out of it. And another thing with the fan service is, I think anybody who is properly mentally prepared for it can enjoy the show. Just know when you go into it that you're going to see a lot of skin.
Don't watch it with your parents.
Or in a public place.
Or watch it with your parents if they're into that. Well, I don't know.
Well, your parents would have to be much cooler than mine.
Yeah, same here.
And that said, another thing about the fan service is that it's rarely like just shoved in a way that it's the primary focus of whatever scene it's in. It kind of just beyond the first introduction of the concept, it sort of just starts to casually throw it in here and there, and you just come to get used to it. It's not like something like Monster Musume where you're going to be seeing it constantly and it's a major focus of the series.
Yeah, you do just really get used to it.
Yeah.
It just, it just slowly gets you into the feel of, okay, yeah, this is a part of the series. It's not really all that special after a while.
And ultimately, it kind of just helps acclimate you to the inherently absurd feeling of the entire series.
Yeah, the series, it's very dumb and fun.
Nonsensical.
Nonsensical.
Well, it's absurd.
In the words of the protagonist.
Yep. Nothing that happens in the show is important. It's just fun to watch.
Pretty much. So if you're going into this for any kind of meaningful story, you won't really get much. But if you're in it for a good time or good fun, then yeah, you'll have a nice.
If you're in it for some of the most awesome fights in anime, you'll have a great time.
When we get right down to it, this is essentially the anime equivalent of something like Kill Bill. It's going to be over the top, high octane, and light on heavy story elements with the occasional nod to give itself some sort of meaning or central theme.
Its name also sounds like Kill Bill.
I would call it kind of anime junk food that you can enjoy, or comfort food, enjoy on a lazy day or something. Yeah. So how about the setting itself of Honnouji Academy? How it's structured and everything?
Well, it's a giant city built around a single academy.
And your status at school pretty much measures your status in life. So if you're a no-star, you're living in the slums. And
I actually kind of like the symbolism of that, because in Japanese culture there's so much that's weighted purely on your how you perform in education or how you're performing at your work and everything, that I just think that's kind of a cute little nod linking it to actual Japanese society.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting little thing, and if you take note in the symbolism at the start with the teacher teaching you about basically teaching the students about the Nazis and Hitler, it kind of getting you ready for this society that's totalitarian over this little structure set up by Satsuki.
I wonder if Hitler in this universe used Goku uniforms.
Maybe.
Maybe. Anything else about anything related to the story, setting, or plot?
Well, those are the least important parts of the show, so.
Pretty much. There really isn't much to say about here.
Yeah, the characters in action are far more important overall.
So let's move on to the characters themselves. So first off, let's talk about the main character herself, Ryoko Matoi. So she's basically a Yankee character.
What do you mean by that?
The delinquent, the girl delinquent kind of character who sometimes wears a long skirt in some anime.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much her. She's one of my favorite anime protagonists ever, like in my top 10.
I
don't
find
really
that
have a
she's
shout-out
really
beyond
cool,
top
but I
10,
think she's actually one of the characters that receives the least
Yeah,
true development in the series.
Fun
Her development's overall
protagonist.
fairly simplistic.
Her development's
very
just
cool,
become
but-
more determined.
Become more determined, kind of open her mind a little bit. It's nothing that we
She
haven't
has
seen a
to-
million
She just
times.
has to not lose her way.
which she fails to do a bunch of times.
Don't lose your way.
But yeah, she's the main protagonist in this series, and she has heavy conflict with Satsuki, and then later on Ragyo. But I'd say the biggest kind of development for her would be how she reacts to Satsuki.
Yeah, Satsuki is definitely the strongest character in the series, and is kind of the crux for almost everything else that goes on as the show develops. So even most of Ryuko's development eventually stems from the actions and revelations revolving around Satsuki.
Yeah, I'd say Ryuko, she's very forward, but she doesn't really. She mostly bounces off the other characters rather than moves forward.
Right.
Yeah. She relies on Mako a lot.
She almost never discovers or does anything on her own. Her development is almost always tied to some other character.
Yeah, and as protagonists go, I've seen a lot worse, and like we said, she's a fun protagonist, but
She fills her role just fine. She's a fantastic visual design. She's cool. She's got a good, fun personality. A lot like the show. She's, there's not much about her to take super seriously, but if you just sit back and, enjoy her for what she is, you're going to have a great time.
Well, that's pretty much why I like her so much as a protagonist, is because of how well she fits the show itself. She's just a fun protagonist, and that's what I'm here for with this show. I'm not really looking for any sort of big character development with her specifically. She's just sort of I like how she just sort of barreled through every situation head first without really thinking, and that was totally okay with me, and it came about with some great moments.
yeah, I mean, as far as the series is concerned, she fits the role pretty perfectly for that type of show.
And I think she balances out real well with Satsuki, because Satsuki is developed in such a strong manner that it kind of... Satsuki's the one who individually moves forward a lot more, and Ryuko's the one who it kind of is developed in proxy to that.
It's also a nice change of pace. I mean, from a lot of other shows that sort of have a very one-dimensional villain who's evil, and they're evil, and that's why you have to fight them. I mean, this show still has that with Ragyo. She's evil just because.
Well, Ragyo is basically a force of nature type villain, where she is basically just that evil.
Yeah, Ragyo is the evil one, but she's not introduced in any major form until a little bit later in the series, so we get to see a lot of Satsuki early on, and that is one of the highlights for me, because she's also an awesome character.
Yeah, but before we go on to Satsuki herself, let's talk about the clothing Ryuko constantly talks to, Senkatsu. Yeah, he's her uniform that turns into a very skimpy outfit.
That's about it. He sort of functions as the mentor role. If there was a Kill la Kill video game, he'd be the character that gives you the tutorial.
Yeah, and gives you hints every now and then,
He,
probably.
he becomes kind of the wise old mentor style character.
So he's one of, I think, 2 Kamui or God robes in the show, which are
The other one is Junketsu.
Junketsu.
Who doesn't actually talk.
Not really a character so much as a symbol.
Just screams internally.
Right. But no, Senketsu's another character that kind of fills a role, and I think he fills it extremely well in that sort of tough mentor style. His personality was great. His voice acting, at least in the Japanese dub, was fantastic. They use him to push. He is the catalyst for pretty much any change that Ryuko takes. If it wasn't because of Satsuki, it's because of Senketsu.
Yeah, and I feel like he develops a lot more as the series goes along, though never really turns anything other than the sort of meaningful mentor type character.
Right. I don't think he really developed. He's developed without being dynamic. He's kind of a constant, and one of the few constants in Ryuko's life.
He sort of expands the role he starts out with as he moves forward.
Right.
Instead of his
he
role
kind of
changes
becomes
as he
her
grows.
Ryuko's rock in this world, for a lack of a better way to say it.
Yeah. Also, I think Senketsu translates to fresh blood.
Yeah, that's what they said in the dub as well.
Okay, so he's sort of named after that, and Ryuko named him because of how he operates, which is by drinking her blood.
But I'm not really sure if there's anything else to say about Senketsu. He basically is just a mentor character.
I think my favorite moment with him was the cop-out recap episode.
Oh yeah, that one was great.
Where
Yeah.
it was like the first 5 or 6 minutes of the episode with him recapping everything that's happened so far.
It was like less than a minute.
Yeah, it was probably like 30 seconds. I didn't get to that episode in my rewatch. I only really rewatched the first like 5 or 6 episodes. But he just starts off like it's going to be a recap episode, and everybody's just like, oh no, groans, because everybody hates recap episodes. But it's not a recap episode. So Senketsu was just Master Troll 2013.
Yeah, I made sure when I realized I wouldn't finish my rewatch to watch the recap part.
But yeah, let's see. Now we can talk about Satsuki Kiryuin. So yeah, she's undoubtedly the most interesting character from the series and probably the most developed one.
Yeah, she's the tyrannical dictator turned less tyrannical dictator.
Like, she's very strong-willed and ideological. Like I said before, the way they symbolize her as always looking down on all the other characters and referring to them as pigs in human clothing very much sort of gives off the vibe that she's not that nice of a person.
She's also the queen of eyebrows.
Yeah, queen of eyebrows. But you always get this sense of almost complete loyalty from all the other characters to her, however. But in some ways that's kind of to her power, but you always get the sense that there's more to it from the Elite Four specifically.
Yeah, I really like Satsuki because to me, especially once you dig into her backstory, feels like a stereotypical anime protagonist with their rock-solid ideals for justice and ambition gone wrong.
Yeah.
Where it's almost like you can see how she could have been a force for good that went down the wrong path.
Which you learn later is she is still on the side of good. It's just she's going about it her own way.
She's the type of character who tries to take the entire weight of the world upon her own shoulders, and eventually, ends up in that kind of mindset that what I'm doing is more, my end goal is more important than the route I take to get there.
Yeah, sort of the end justifies the means.
Right.
As long as not everybody die, as long as I save the people I care about, anybody else can die type mindset.
Which, I mean,
I don't think she ever gets to that level of darkness, but she gets close.
Yeah, but out of all the characters, I feel like she bounces off all the other characters a lot more than any of the other characters bounce off each other. Like, just her personality and how she influences everything going on with the other characters. Everyone's looking at her pretty much in some ways, or at least directed towards her with their actions. They're either serving her or serving against her pretty much.
Yeah, she's sort of polarizing for the rest of the cast, where there's that very it seems like a very defined line of with Satsuki or against Satsuki.
Yeah, and there's pretty much no middle ground. You're either fighting against her either alone or with Ryuko or Nudist Beach, or you're fighting with her as one of the 2 stars or 3 stars or 1 stars. Though those are basically the henchmen.
Well, her Kamui is named Junketsu, which is purity, and that's sort of a point that Ryuko pokes fun at her with.
Even the way she's dressed, like her character design, her design is very clean and white with a little bit of blue here and there, which kind of counteracts the red and black of Ryuko's outfit.
It's the exact opposite.
Pretty much.
Ryuko's Senketsu is dirty, patched together, messy looking, mismatched, whereas Junketsu is very symmetrical and the opposite color scheme. Has both of his eyes.
Okay, then I guess moving on. Let's talk about Mako.
Mako!
Hallelujah.
So if there's a brighter sunshine type character for this series, I think it would be Mako. Like, she is pretty much the ball of happiness, and basically she's an unrelenting force of, I guess you could say, good, or of, if you want to.
She's the feel-good character.
Pretty much.
Even if everybody else is sad, she's the one who comes and picks him up off the ground and says that everything's going to be all right.
She's also quite often oblivious to the insanity going on around her.
Oh yeah, she just has no. The reason she says everything's going to be all right is because she has no idea what's actually happening.
And she herself is kind of all kinds of insanity herself.
Yeah. Her. I think she gets a lot of that from her family, which we'll talk about later.
We can mention them right here. Like, her family kind of all operates in one unit. They're kind of referred to as the Mako family in pretty much every character. But but yeah, there are all kinds of different versions of crazy, with the dad being a back alley doctor, which I like the points where they mentioned that when I think episode 12 was it, when Ryuko goes crazy against Nue, and she's starting to lose a lot of blood, and Mako's like, oh my gosh, I've seen so many people die from blood loss at my dad's back alley doctor and stuff, because he steals the blood. And they all live in their sort of rundown house down in the slums, and yet they're always so very cheerful, eating the mom's mystery croquettes, which are made from apparently you don't know what.
Well, it's a mystery.
I mean, it's the best kind of surprise until you go to the bathroom. Yeah, and then of course Mataro is the little kid that steals from people and stuff like that.
He's the first person, or I guess Ryuko doesn't fight him, but he's the first person to challenge Ryuko, I guess.
And then immediately bow down.
Yeah. He got his butt kicked by Ryuko's sheer willpower.
But Mako, out of all the characters, she's the one that I feel most influences Ryuko besides Satsuki. Like, every time, basically, if Senketsu is her rock, Mako is kind of her other larger rock.
It's her role.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make a bad joke. Yeah, Mako is probably the only person that Ryuko always listens to.
Yeah, a lot of times she is by herself, only really listening to herself, even ignoring Senketsu a lot. But when it comes to Mako, she will actually listen to her, what she has to say. Though that is mostly because Mako is such an unrelenting force when it comes to the other characters.
Yeah, Mako's sort of has a way. Oh, you go.
Mako's even saved Ryuko in several instances just by kind of talking down other people.
Yeah, I was gonna say Mako is sort of the type of person that she asserts her dominance in the situation as soon as possible, and then passes it off to Ryuko. You know, it's just she's in control, and now it's Ryuko's turn, and now your butt's kicked. So that's sort of her little progression chain in a lot of her Hallelujah scenes, which are some of my favorite scenes in the show.
Yeah.
Hallelujah.
I screenshotted so many moments from those.
They go by so fast, though.
Yeah. I have to be very precise when trying to get a specific image.
She talks fast.
Mm-hmm.
Really fast. But anything else about Mako?
The episode where she fought Ryuko, I don't remember a ton about that because that was after my rewatch, or after where I left off on my rewatch. But I do remember that was a fun episode.
Yeah, and
Well,
That's one of my favorite episodes.
it was a
actually.
very thematic episode, and kind of a little bit removed from the rest of the series in its message, where it was kind of putting forward how money can blind you from what's really important in your life, which are the people.
It's one of the only episodes that really took itself seriously, I think. At least in some capacity. It didn't take itself entirely seriously. The show never does that.
It definitely, from a thematic standpoint, it tried.
But it had it had a theme, and it had a moral that it was trying to portray that was like an actual serious moral of don't let money blind you from your own happiness and the happiness of the people you care about. Whereas the moral of the rest of the show is clothes are evil and everybody should be naked all the time. You know.
Well, wasn't the theme. That's the plot.
That's just the show.
Well, the theme the show was pushing forward with that whole narrative was discussing more how you need to not let the ideals and constraints of society define who you are. You need to not be afraid to be an individual and find your own way. The show is very, very, very obvious about what its central theme is. It's not. Kill la Kill is not a subtle show in any way.
You almost sort of make it sound like there's a deeper meaning, which
almost
it skirts the boundary, but it's really not there. But it does sort of cause a little bit of a controversy in whether people consider it a true parody or not, because it almost has sort of a message other than, haha, look how stupid shonen shows are.
It obviously has a message other than that. It's just, not a... It conveys it through you don't have to sacrifice having a theme to also be a parody.
I mean, before
it wasn't
that,
just purely making fun of how stupid some shonens can be. It was doing that, but also pushing forward a message, which is how a lot of these, the shows from this director are.
That's how Gurren Lagann worked.
Gurren Lagann did very much the exact same thing, just with a different theme and a different genre. Though those are not mutually exclusive things.
But
a lot of people
I still think at most the show just flirts with depth, not actually goes very deep.
Yeah.
Well, it's more just that it's not subtle about it.
Yeah.
It puts its theme right there in your face. The main enemy is clothing, uniforms. It makes it extremely obvious, and the idea of like the Goku uniforms being that, there is a sort of strength in uniformity, but that ultimately it doesn't match what you as an individual can do, or your own individual life, and almost all of its theming is centered around that, and it's all made very obvious and blatant. And I think it doesn't lessen how powerful of a theme it is or how important of one it is. It just makes it very easy to see, and especially in Western media, we're not used to themes being that obvious. Generally, there's a bit more depth to it, and a bit more of an attempt at subtlety. Whereas Kill la Kill, obviously, subtlety was the furthest thing from its mind. But because it's such an over-the-top, extreme example of media, I think that being so blatant and over-the-top with itself, it actually pushed forward the theme a lot more than if it had tried to be subtle.
Yeah, and I think I did want to just point out that I disagree with the argument I was sort of pushing a little bit earlier. I was playing devil's advocate a little bit, because I think that the show, that theme is there, but it never takes it too seriously, which is why I still think it fits very nicely into the parody slot. You know, it's there, and you can
Right.
see
You
it.
do not. It's kind of like an episode of South Park where it obviously has a meaning and stuff, but if you just want to watch it for the stupid shock humor, you can. And
And that's really the
Kill la
main
Kill, you
appeal
just
of the
swap out
show.
stupid shock humor with fan service and over the top uber action, and it's it's the same meaning, it just being a different scenario.
Yeah, there's really one appeal to the show, and the other is like extra goodies, where if you're coming for the extra goodies, you might be disappointed because the appeal is the main show.
Yeah, I can't think
Uh,
of too many people who would watch this for its thematic offerings, but they are definitely something that help give the show an identity and help make it more than just stupid absurdist humor.
but I honestly think that anybody who is watching it purely for the theme and message it tries to push would come away disappointed because of how it doesn't really take that message very seriously.
Well, we kind of went off on a tangent over Mako, but now let's talk about the Elite Four. And since none of the characters really work that well on their own, we'll be talking about them with the context of each other. So the
Wait, we're
first
talking
of
about
them,
Pokemon now?
sure, we're talking about the Elite Four from any Pokemon game. So, so first off is Iragamagori, who is a very large and very loud man. But also his height is very inconsistent throughout the series.
He's like the original King Kong.
Sometimes he's just a very large dude. Sometimes he's like a giant, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes he's inside a car and he fits perfectly, and then another scene you might see him where his head is just sticking out of the roof with the sort of the fabric on top peeled down.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd say I'll probably talk about this. We'll probably talk about this more when we get to the actual animation. But he's one of the characters who they drew very wildly, but they made his inconsistent height is kind of consistent for the series' style.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to point out that there's a lot of stuff about this series that doesn't really care about
Consistency.
with design, at least the subtleties of it.
Well, it's like we just discussed. The show was not concerned about subtlety in any way. As long as you got the primary message, it was fine.
Like this isn't the type of show, like a lot of it takes place in and around a school, and like there are some shows that take place in a school where like everything is sort of you know how to find your way around the school from watching the show. I would be so lost in Honoji Academy. I would be late to class every day because I would not know where anything was.
Well, you'd be
It's a
expelled
mountaintop
by
fortress.
well, plus you'd also be expelled by Gamagori himself, and probably receive punishment. So Gamagori is the head of the disciplinary committee. So he's the most loudest person on campus and the most loyalist to Satsuki herself.
Mm-hmm. Whenever there's any slight against Satsuki, he's the first to become enraged.
Yeah, and well, he is kind of his uniform sort of makes him out to be both a masochist and a sadist.
He is a weird man.
And he also has a crush on Mako.
Yeah, actually, I liked how they played out the crush over the series, where occasionally, whenever he hears Mako's name, he kind of perks up, or he always pays more attention to her. But at first, it's not really shown as much of a crush as it is him just taking notice. Until later on, when it becomes clear that he has a hard-on crush for her. Though sadly, that does not turn out to be the actual ship that the series goes with at the end.
Well, actually, the creator has said that it is, so there's a lot of discussion about that.
I think his relationship with Mako is one of the few instances where the show is subtle.
That's actually a good point. I would agree with that. Well, it's subtle in a way. It's not subtle in that, they obviously like each other. It's more subtle in, like, what was the end result of everything.
Yeah. A majority of the relationship is implied. It's not subtle in that if you're not paying attention, you won't notice it. it's subtle in that it's not at the forefront of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Which, to be fair, he isn't actually one of the main characters.
And also, there's well,
Uh,
there would be
cutting
no
that part
excuse for this show to have romance as a central part of it.
Yeah. It's definitely one of the things where it's an interesting side note, but really not the focus
Right.
of what the show is supposed
It's
to
a
be
cute
on.
thing, but nothing, nothing,
Yeah.
nothing you need to focus on.
And that's pretty much the main thing about him is basically he's loyal, he's the disciplinary head, and he has a slight crush on Mako. But
He's
the
a
next,
sadomasochist.
oh yeah, and he's a sadomasochist. But next up is Nonon Jakuzura, who is she's been Satsuki's friend since kindergarten, pretty much.
Mhm.
And she's also the head of the non-athletic committee, or club.
I think it's the culture clubs.
She's
Yeah,
all of the clubs that aren't sports are under her domain.
Yeah, and
So-
she's also kind of, it's implied that she's the head of the music club, pretty much.
Well, I mean, she's got the whole band conductor thing going on.
Yeah,
with
that's
her outfit.
and what she does in way of combat and what her three-star outfits make her out to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's very, I mean, I don't think they ever say, like, oh, she's in charge of band, but you know she's in charge of band.
Yeah.
They might have actually said she might have declared herself as leader of the band club or something at some point.
Maybe, but it's
Yeah.
not like something
I don't
that they
remember
repeat
exactly,
through
but
the show.
It's not something they have to say.
Yeah, it's
Pretty
not.
much.
It's just there, you know.
I'm not really sure if there's any much else to say about her, though. I mean,
Well, her relationship to Satsuki is interesting. I think she has the strongest kind of backstory tie to her.
I wanted to say that for some reason I see a lot of people complain about her voice in Japanese. She's voiced by Mayumi Shintani, and I actually really like her voice. I think it adds a ton to her character and is one of the most memorable things about her.
I would
to
agree
me.
with that.
yeah.
And I mean, like, I can understand why some people would find it annoying. It's one of those high-pitched, nasally voices, but it really fits her very well in the Japanese dub, and it's one of the more memorable things about her character.
And it makes her sound like she doesn't care quite as much as the rest of the characters, which I kind of think fits her character.
Which I feel like Sarah Ann Williams also did a good job of that in the English dub.
Yeah, I would agree.
Just kidding. But yeah, and then next we have is Uzu Sanagayama, who was he the head of the athletic clubs?
Yes.
I think so, yeah.
Yes. So yeah, he's basically this. I believe he was formerly some sort of gang leader, and he always cares. Yeah, and he's basically
He's a
what's it
kendo
called?
nerd.
Yeah, kendo. He's a kendo nerd, basically. We're sort of introduced to him as a bit more cocky of a character. He's actually the first of the Elite Four Ryuko actually faces, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Which, first time she meets him, she kicks his ass because he was pretty cocky. Which he then sews his eyes shut, and suddenly he's 10 times more powerful than
He
her.
goes full daredevil.
Yeah, you never go full daredevil.
But that episode that you're talking about is one of those that I remember because I caught this show when it was in simulcast, and that was one of the episodes that sort of blew everybody's mind in how they had a rematch that episode. You know, with this was before. This was actually only a few. Maybe it was like episode 5 or 6.
Yeah, it was pretty early on.
So it hadn't really fully established itself as the type of parody of the shonen genre that it is yet. So people weren't expecting this rematch to happen until much later in the show, and then boom, it's right there, like 10 minutes later. I mean, that was just a really cool moment. To me, at least, and just seeing people's reactions to that was very interesting as well.
I feel like he was a character that you got since was supposed to be more developed, but never actually did, because when we finally got around to the basically the elections episode where each of the Elite Four is going up against Ryuko, he's the only one who never actually got to face her because Nue came in and basically stole his limelight.
So I think that's partially because he had already fought her.
Yeah, there's no reason to have her fight him a third time.
Yeah.
They already did the rematch. And also, Nui is awesome. And
Yeah.
more Nui, please.
It honestly, outside of the next character we'll talk about in just a sec, I feel like he was one of the least developed of the Elite Four, or at least second least developed, I suppose. Anyways, now on to the least developed character, Hoka Inumuta, I believe is how it's pronounced. I'm not quite sure.
Hoka Inumuta, a.k.a. Super Hacker.
Yeah, he's basically just there to tell characters what is going on, explain things to the audience and stuff like that. But yeah, he's basically just a hacker character who I actually liked how the his battle with Ryuko plays out because it's over pretty quickly, but he straight up resigns from the battle.
It was a cool way of showing somebody who really isn't suited for combat at all, fighting and not. I mean, it was a pretty quick total defeat, but you did feel for a little bit that he had a chance.
Yeah, and okay, I liked how his outfit was just a bunch of keyboards all over his body. He's just constantly typing in these weird poses, though.
Yeah, that was great. I see GIF gifs of that all over the internet.
But really, there's not much else to say about him. He's just there to explain things to the audience, pretty much.
He's the hacker, that's it.
Yeah, he's a pretty stereotypical hacker character.
Yeah, there's not much depth there. He kind of just filled the fourth guy role.
Pretty much.
It needed to be an Elite Four. They had to have four, and he's number 4.
3 just can't be elite.
Well, if I remember correctly, isn't 4 sort of the equivalent of 13 in Japan as far as unlucky numbers?
The 4 sort of means death. It's a synonym with the word for death. Or homonym,
yes.
Sorry.
Pokemon just got a lot darker.
But anyways, okay, moving on from the Elite Four, we have Akira Mikisugi, also known as the head of Nudisto Beach. I can't say as well as Adam. So you may have seen, if you've looked around at Kill la Kill before, you may know him as the glowing purple nipple guy. Well, and I guess his naughty bits do glow as well sometimes. And Mako's mom seems very interested in them.
Well, who wouldn't be?
I mean, they're glowing and you have to pay attention to them.
I mean, he's a man that calls attention to himself in any way that he can, except for when he doesn't want to, because sometimes he goes undercover and messes up his hair and puts on glasses, and that is the best disguise.
And has a hunchback.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's basically actually one of the first characters we're introduced to, because he's actually that history teacher who gives the lesson on Hitler and Nazis at the very first episode.
He's the very first voice we hear.
Pretty much. So with him, he actually has 2 really different personalities and designs. So he has the old man teacher personality where he kind of feels more homely, sort of, very slightly older than he actually is, pretty much. And then he goes into his nudist beach form where his clothes start falling off randomly, and he has this very young bachelor sort of young man kind of vibe to him, very sexual. Which
he uses two different voices. Both I believe his Japanese voice actor's name
both
is.
His Japanese and English one both sort of have different voices to the different tones, but they're the same voice actors.
And when in his teacher form, he sort of talks a little bit like an older man. And then all of a sudden he's super sexy.
Which matches his design, because his clothes start falling off because he's too sexy for them.
He's too sexy for his shirt. He's too sexy for these pants.
He's too sexy for underwear.
It's safe to say he doesn't make a great first impression with Ryuko.
Not at all. I don't think he would make a first good impression with anybody if he treated them like that.
He's definitely he's our first introduction to nudist beach, and as far as first introductions, we get the sense that they're kind of crazy.
That wouldn't necessarily be wrong.
Yeah, I mean.
Okay, who in this show isn't entirely crazy?
Okay, you have a good point there. Guts. It's totally the dog Guts.
That's true. Guts is absolutely in his right mind, unlike everybody else. Guts knows what's going on. He just can't do anything about it because he's a dog.
Who wears a hoodie?
What if he's cold?
I mean, what would you wear if you were a dog?
A hoodie.
Exactly.
But as far as Mikisugi is concerned, I feel like he is sort of like another mentor kind of character to Ryuko. Not as heavily as Senketsu is, but...
He feels more like the ally than the mentor.
I feel like he's an unwanted mentor.
He's the high chaos mentor.
So he's the chaotic evil one? Or chaotic neutral?
Well, he's the chaotic, neutral, I guess. What a bunch of nerds.
Well, who else would you be thinking would host a anime discussion podcast or animation discussion podcast?
Wait a second, I'm on this podcast.
Exactly.
Crap.
But anyways, but yeah, he has some sort of he leads the plot along later on, and he's always helping out Ryuko and Senketsu, sort of in between things, but a lot of times he's sitting back and watching things happen, I think.
Yeah, he's sort of a more passive but manipulative character. He's the reason that Ryuko finds Senketsu at all. He set that up.
Yeah, and he's the reason why she has the glove that allows her to activate him as well. I don't think there's really anything else to say about Akira Mikisugi, so now let's keep...
He's not a very well-developed character either.
No.
But once again, I think he fills his role just fine.
He does, yeah. He does what he's there to do.
Which is to reveal the glowing tits.
He doesn't have that much screen time either, so it's not like he had much of a chance to develop.
Like I say, he's kind of the ally more than anything else.
And a bit of a more of a joke character as well.
That as well, but then again, almost every character in the show has moments where they're the butt of a joke, besides, I guess, Satsuki.
I think he has a lot more background screen time than a lot of people would think. He's not very often in the spotlight.
Yeah, that's true. He's sort of, if you're paying close attention to what's going on behind the scenes, you might catch him looking out a window or something.
Well, I don't think there's really anything else to say about Akira, so let's move on. Alright, next up is Ragyo Kiryuin, also known as the best mom of all time. No questions asked. Don't even try to compare any other mom.
I was going to question it, but I guess I won't.
Best is an interesting word to use.
Yeah, that's sort of the opposite direction I was thinking.
Yeah, she...
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't say worst either, but...
Are you sure?
She has her upsides. At
What?
least two very, very obvious ones.
Okay, I see what you're saying. All right, SK. Okay, you're talking about her two like wavy rainbow hair things, right?
Exactly.
She has
Dude, they look like holographic Pokemon cards, but on her head.
She has a really cool design.
I think you're miscounting because she has one rainbow hair thingy.
Oh.
But it's on each side of her head.
Yeah, there you go.
So her head.
So it's actually drawn as two.
Yeah.
See, I was just talking from an artist perspective.
Okay, I'll buy that. She has two hair thingies. So Ragyo, obviously she's Satsuki's mom, which you're expecting to be kind of the same level of evil, and you find out she's actually 10 times more evil.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just about. I actually think that's a little bit of a low estimate, but she's crazy evil. She's destroy the world evil.
She's busy. Whereas Satsuki is more of
Satsuki's more the absolute order style character, where she's not really evil. She's much more of a neutral, trying to do what she thinks is right.
If we're going based on D&D terms again, I'd say Satsuki is the lawful evil character, or I guess neutral.
I wouldn't consider evil, because ultimately
Yeah.
what she does isn't even that terrible. And
Yeah, so
you know,
she'd be the neutral, the lawful neutral type character,
she
whereas
yeah she
Ragyo is
yeah
the
that's what
chaotic
I would
evil.
put her.
Yeah, so just going back
Yeah,
to one thing about Satsuki again, is that I think she is sort of, she thinks that she can save the world,
she
but
thinks
only
she
if
is
it's
the
done
only one
her
who can save
specific
the
way.
world.
Yeah, she wants it done her
That's the
way,
type of
and if anybody else tries to get in her way, they're dead.
Well, it's not that she wants it done her way, it's that she feels that her way is the only way. And that she feels that what she's doing is going to save everyone, and therefore it is of paramount importance, even if she has to hurt some people along the way. Her ideals are in the right place, but she's going about it wrong because of her misconception about the, whatever you have it, about the competency of those around her, about, her own overestimation of her own abilities, whatever you want to use as the reason.
Yeah, and then back to Ragyo.
Which Reigyo is
She's just evil.
right. If you want it in the nerdiest terms you can possibly put it, Satsuki is pure white mana from Magic the Gathering, and Reigyo is pure black mana.
Yeah, it's
Satsuki is pure order, Reigyo is pure ambition.
Nerd.
Yes, this is the Blatant Filler podcast where we're all nerds here. But yeah, Ragyo, if we're going based on actual terms used to describe villains, she's the force of nature type villain where everything she does, if you get in her way, she will stomp all over you, and she's doing evil for evil's sake, pretty much.
Yeah, that's about it.
When we're actually our first introduction to her is over the phone with Satsuki, and we're kind of given a bit unsettling feeling of her, but we're never actually shown anything to actually depict that until much later when she kind of molests Satsuki a little bit.
Are you sure kinda is the right word choice?
That continues
Not-
to be the most absolutely baffling scene in the show to me, and I've never
Yeah.
really figured out why it was there or what they were trying
Yeah.
to convey with it. The show rarely does fan service for just fan service sake, so I don't feel like that's what they were going for. And it's not like it even showed that much, so that would
Yeah.
make it really weird. It felt like they were trying for something, and I'm just completely missing it.
Yeah,
I
I'd
think-
say that's the one scene that you could cut out and it really wouldn't hurt the series at all.
I think they were trying to sort of show how overboard evil she is, in the same way that like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure usually uses how people treat dogs as a gauge for how evil they are.
Or
This-
animals in general.
Yeah. Uh, this was, I think, to just sort of show how bad she is. And maybe they went a little overboard with it because that was one of maybe two scenes in the show that I was kind of uncomfortable watching.
And
Yeah, definitely I think up there with the weakest, the
Yeah.
weakest moments in the show.
I mean, overall, she's a really fun sort of force of nature villain, but that scene definitely could have been cut out, I feel.
Overall she's a really cool villain character. I think she's like up there in like the best villains ever like list for me.
As far as anime goes, I think I would have to agree. She's such an intimidating, just interesting presence within the show.
And,
She just has a fantastic theme song too.
That as
yeah,
well.
Yeah, Blumenkrantz, I'd probably say it's if we're doing a comparison for Gurren Lagann, it's probably the equivalent of Libra Me from Hell.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's superior though. Just
Yeah.
it really gives her a unique feeling. Her music is almost synonymous with who she is. That just kind of overpowering, almost brutal presence, but that still has a bit of an elegance to it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean she's oppressive, and that
Yes,
song
exactly.
is
That's the word
oppressive.
for it.
You can feel the weight of every note and each of her steps and the radiance of her hair and her rainbow glow, which is
Yeah,
like some
actually,
amazing art direction and
Yeah,
sound design.
her entire character design is pretty interesting because she normally wears pretty much all white clothes and the only color you ever see is just the weirdness of her hair, which is just giving this rainbow glow everywhere.
Her hair is so crazy.
And it's not even like comical rainbow color. It's just physically glowing this rainbow color around.
It's sort of mesmerizing with the way that they animated it, and I think that's definitely what they were going for. And the sort of aura around her, I mean, Satsuki has a similar thing going on, but it's more of a white, hot sunlight with
Right.
Satsuki, whereas Ragyo looks like there's like a full-on like nebula behind her.
But yeah, so yeah, that's Ragyo, but doesn't she have a right hand sort of I don't know, say a sewer of some sort? Oh wait, isn't that Nue Harame?
Nui.
Nui. So you know that how they say that the Grim Reaper is probably a skeleton in a black road with a scythe? Well, I say the Grim Reaper is a girl in a pink dress with an eye patch and half a scissor blade.
Yep.
So,
Nui is I don't know if I already called somebody else my favorite character in the show, but if I did, they just got bumped off by Nui because and I think I'm in the minority here with how much I like her as a character and also with how much I like her theme song. I don't know if I've actually ever heard anybody else say that they like it more than Blumenkranz. I think for all I know, I'm the only person in that boat. If anybody else agrees with me, like comment or something because I
No,
need to
you're the
feel
only
less
one in
alone.
that boat.
Yeah, I'm probably the only one. I
I can't
really
remember
like her
Nui's theme off the top of my head.
Really?
Right.
I can remember it, and it like pretty much gives me chills. It just sounds so purely evil, and not in the same type of evil as Ragyo. It's sort of a little
well,
bit more of
well,
there's
with
a
with her
screw
theme,
loose.
with her theme, it sort of starts out a bit more innocently, and then just gradually gets more and more darker. I feel.
Yeah, her theme sounds like an evil doll is chasing after you, and that's sort of what she is as a character.
Which,
Well,
and as far as I know, we mentioned Irigama Gori sort of had some inconsistencies in how his animation is held. Nui is like that, but 10 times more with sort of how flat she appears to almost every character and just how absurd she is with her animation.
Yeah, and she doesn't have a whole lot of shading on her, whereas the other characters do to sort of give them that depth. And yeah, you're right, she looks flat. You know, she looks
Like she's
almost
2D in a 2D animation, pretty much.
yeah, which is more in line with some of the other stuff Trigger's done since then.
She's pretty much chaos incarnate a lot of times. Like she does what she wants, but she doesn't really have much order to her. It feels.
she's mania. She's pure anarchy.
Nui
Like if
reminds
Satsuki's
me.
order, Nui is just pure, the complete lack of order.
Yeah, that's about right. I think Nui sort of reminds me, personality-wise, of the Joker, and that's kind of why I like her a lot. Is because she's unpredictable, she's insane, she doesn't have a screw loose. They are all just bouncing around in her head, not attached to anything.
All right. Well, I don't think there's any other characters we really want to focus on from the series. And
Yeah, there were a few others who had some moments, got some screen time, but nobody of real importance that
yeah,
I think.
yeah. All right. So now let's move on to the animation of Kill la Kill. So the animation is a bit all over the place, but it's kind of its own style at the same time, I feel.
I like the animation of the show a lot.
It's
Yeah, I think it's utterly fantastic. It's definitely extremely stylized and high octane, and it's not meant to be seen as something realistic, which fits perfectly with the rest of the show. But in terms of just quality and how well it conveys the ridiculous scope of the action scenes and moments, it's, fantastic. And it really does have its own kind of style and definition that gives Kill la Kill a very unique look as far as anime goes.
I'd say I probably wouldn't want to watch it for very many other series, but for Kill la Kill itself, it works extremely well. Like some of the animation feels a bit lower quality, but every frame feels like it fits with the show itself.
mhm. it feels very Trigger than just kind of like the change in quality that still feels consistent.
Yeah, they've sort of built as a studio a style upon what they did with
Right.
this anime. I don't remember if they do anything as Studio Trigger before this or not.
They did the Little Witch Academia short.
That's what I thought, but I wasn't 100%
I
sure.
believe Inferno Cop was also
Oh
technically
yeah,
Trigger.
Inferno. Yeah, though I'm not sure if they did it as Trigger itself or if it was just the animators.
Yeah, I was just trying to figure out when they took on the name Trigger but this was the first thing from them that I've seen when they were called Trigger. Everything else I've seen from them except for I guess Beano Battle has sort of maintained that high but low quality animation style.
Well, I
I don't
think
think it's really low. I think, there's areas where they cut corner, but that it fits the style so well that I really wouldn't want it to be a higher,
No, it
They,
looks
they, I,
awesome.
yeah, we have a very good example right now of what a higher budget version of that looks like in Kisnavier, and I really don't think it looks any better. It's like crisper, but it doesn't do anything to push forward the show as a medium or anything like that.
Yeah, and I mean, Kill la Kill looks great when it needs to, and when it doesn't look great, it doesn't matter.
Right.
In fact, I would argue that there isn't really any point that it doesn't look great from my personal tastes. Like,
I would
yeah,
I
if you
would
wanna,
actually I would agree with that. I think at any
you
point
could,
where you're going to be evaluating the action, it looks fantastic.
yeah,
So
like
or
you
not the
could,
animation.
you really have to nitpick and like really pick out a specific frame that doesn't look as good, and which you'll never see that when you're actually watching.
another thing I want to note about the animation is it does atmosphere really, really well. So a thing to note about the series is it uses heavy amount of fog and a lots of lens flares in the background. I'm of the personal opinion that 2D animation doesn't really do shading or lighting all that well compared to 3D animation, and I'd say Kill la Kill might be one of the few exceptions where it kind of does.
Well, if you want to get
'Cause-
technical for a moment, it's a lot easier in 3D animation because you
yeah,
write
well,
algorithms
yeah.
to have it perfect based off of physics engine, whereas
Yeah, but
in
2D
2D you have to
animation,
draw it all.
yeah. A lot of times lighting just comes off as either really flat or really not all that dynamic.
Right. It's very difficult. I can tell you that as somebody who's spent a long time doing art myself. That 2D lighting and everything is very difficult.
Which the thing with Kill la Kill though is they have all these. Every time there's a light source, you can usually bet that there are a number of different lens flares going on screen, and light reflecting off of a blade, you'll usually see this cool little shimmering off of it as well, and everything about the lighting feels right to me.
They sort of built. I mean, I don't know if it was used before this. I'm sure it was somewhere, but they really made their sort of like cross glimmer effect that it's like a four-pointed star. I associate that with Kill la Kill when I see it other places. If you know what I'm talking about. I mean, I hope you can, like anybody who's seen the show knows what I'm talking about. Where like when they do a glint of a sword, they sort of do this like it's like a four-pointed star cross type thing, and it's really cool. And that is sort of almost more a logo of Kill la Kill to me than the actual show's logo is, because that's just what I think of when I think Kill la Kill is that type of shine.
And as far as and almost every single scene, you'll have some kind of fog either in the background or foreground going around, and I'm not sure if that's just to be said it so to tell you like, hey, Hanoji Academy is really high in the sky where clouds are going by on the ground, but everything, even in the slums, there's heavy amounts of fog going on screen, and I actually really like it because it always gives some sort of movement to what's going on in the whatever scene you're in.
Yeah, it's sort of a way to keep the scene dynamic even when nothing else is going on. Like uh, like in Michael Bay movies, you always got the camera spinning around the character, and that's like a real pain in the butt to do in animation. Even though they actually do that a couple times, and that sort of blew my mind when I saw how well they pulled it off. But having that fog adds an extra layer that you can put motion in, even if the foreground and background aren't moving. There's something in between them that is.
Let's see. Another thing to note is how grainy the background art tends to be. Like everything feels very lived in, no matter where you are, whether it's in the slums sort of parts of Hanoji Academy or up on top in the academy grounds. It always feels grainy and sort of run down a bit here and there, which I always feels like gives a nice air to the atmosphere of the place. That hey, it's a pretty rough, it's just a pretty rough and tumble place.
Yeah, it's got that gritty aesthetic. It's sort of dirty, except for where Satsuki is, because that's always pristine. And that gives a nice contrast to her living situation versus the other characters.
And speaking of Satsuki and the cleanliness, I just love the moment in the first episode where the tiny little splotch of blood hit her.
Oh yeah, and everybody freaked out.
Yeah, the Elite Four pretty much ready to kill her at that point. Kill Ryoko. Alright, I guess moving on, let's talk about the sound design for Kill la Kill. So,
Freaking awesome.
That soundtrack, yo.
Sawano does it again.
Yeah, so for those who do not know, Sawano, he's noted for a few other soundtracks, specifically Attack on Titan's soundtrack, the Seven Deadly Sins soundtrack, and currently the soundtrack to Kaibaneria of the Iron Fortress.
He also did Gundam Unicorn.
And Noah Zero, and I believe Guilty Crown is another notable one that people bring up.
That was the best thing about that show, was his soundtrack.
But yeah, the soundtrack is so good for this series. Just all the soundtrack matches everything that's going on the screen, and all the character tracks match their personalities perfectly, like we mentioned with Blooming Crayons for Ragyo, but we also have Ryuko's, I believe the official name for it is Before My Body is Dry, but it's basically the Don't Lose Your Way track.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you've got the Elite Four soundtrack and stuff.
Lumen Krantz.
And I did listen to Nui's theme for a few seconds, and yeah, that definitely really fits the character.
Like,
it's so awesome.
Yeah, I don't think there's a single track that didn't fit their character. The entire soundtrack, it's just plain awesome. Probably one of the better tracks to come out of the last couple of years, I think.
I don't think you could, leave it off of a list of the best anime soundtracks. It's not only is the quality absolutely top notch, but it very often fits the theme or the characters it's trying to portray. It just works where they want it to work and how they want it to work. And when you're talking about a soundtrack, that's sometimes more important than the base quality.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the better soundtracks that Hiroyuki Sawano has produced. Every track is pretty memorable to me. I still listen to it. I mean, like, I caught this show almost, is it 3 years ago now?
It came out in 2003. Almost.
13.
It's getting close
no,
to.
It was the end of 2013.
Yeah, so nearly 3 years.
It's going to be 3 years at the end of this year, like 2.5 years. I watched this show a while ago. It was one of the earlier anime that I watched, period. And I'm still listening to the soundtrack on a fairly regular basis, and I can't say that about too many shows.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the soundtracks you can always revisit and just plain up love. Like, it doesn't really, you don't really age out of it or anything like that. It's just always good. Like, I've heard Blooming Crayons so many times, and it's still just an amazing song. Like, the thousandth time I've listened to it.
Yeah, I've got at least 3 songs from the soundtrack in my all-time favorite list.
I mean, like, I feel really wishy-washy with the soundtrack because, like, every single track I hear, I'm just like, oh man, this is the best thing.
I'm gonna say that about every track. I can't recall any tracks I think are bad, but I don't love them all. But then again, you rarely do. Yeah. I can't think of any series where I'm in love with every single bit of music in this game or this anime
the closest
or whatever.
One I have would be the original Hellsing soundtrack, and even that one had some tracks I didn't really like. I
mean, just speaking of soundtracks, I really like the Angel Beats soundtrack, even though that show has its flaws, and the soundtrack is not one of them in my book.
So I guess that's our opinions on the soundtrack.
I was trying to bring up just audio cues, not related to the music. Just there are a lot of they have a lot of audio cues that are distinct to each character that I think work really well. Satsuki's heel click.
Oh yeah,
and
Yeah, there's a lot of really good Foley.
yeah,
the Hallelujah with
yeah,
Mako.
Oh, that's a good one.
yeah, and or like how Ryoko's sort of the glove thing where the click that it makes when she transforms.
Yeah.
There's a lot of really nice sound effects, and I mean, I really like the sort of pound that they used for punches
Hmm.
and kicks. I felt like there was a lot of weight to it, and you could really feel the pain. And the animation coupled with that really nicely. One of the standout moments from the show for me was when Satsuki and Ryuko punched each other, and then craters appeared in the walls behind them from the force of those punches and kicks. Like that was just absolutely epic to me, and like that's one of the scenes that really sticks with me.
But moving on, what were your guys' thoughts on the openings and closings for Kill la Kill?
I don't remember much of the closings, but I definitely like both openings. And like Adam said, the song in the second opening was utterly fantastic. That's definitely one of my favorite opening songs ever.
Yeah, I think I am sort of in the minority in that I really didn't care that much for either the openings personally, either visually
Yeah, I
or
would say you're definitely
musically.
in the minority from what I've heard.
And that's okay. We respect your opinions, even though they're
Yeah.
trash.
Well, your waifu is garbage, just like your favorite opening. But anyways, but yeah, I mean, they were all right, but I never really liked them enough to really continue watching them. I'd usually just skip them and go straight to the episode a lot of times. They just really weren't stand out for me, but I'm not sure why.
What did you
As
think
far
about the endings?
uh, ending was the first ending was more interesting merely because of what it all the obscure references to other shows it made. Like I'm not even sure what the show it was referencing was supposed to be. I can't quite remember. But that was interesting. The second one I really liked purely for how Mako focused it was. Very cute.
I really really liked the first opening, and not opening. I meant I really really liked the first ending, and I didn't really like the Mako ending that much actually. I felt like maybe this was the point, but I felt like it was sort of jarring to see that right after what was going on in the show at that point. The second half of the show is kind of when things get really intense. I mean, they were all really intense, but like they take it up a notch, and I didn't really like seeing that afterwards,
Yeah,
especially
I
with
feel like a lot of anime have that problem.
yeah, and with the first opening, or I keep saying opening, the first ending, it was really cool in that if you go back and look at it, it's actually sort of like a little epilogue. That's sort of what happens immediately after the last episode of the show, or that's like the next important event is them meeting up and hanging out after the events of the show. Uh, or at least it's Ryuko on her way to do that. And I was really hoping that for the final episode of the show, they would reuse the first ending instead of the Mako ending, because I felt like that would have just fit so well. And they didn't do it, and that's one of the only things about the show that upset me, is that I really feel like they should have revisited the first ending theme instead of Mako's on the final episode at least.
Okay, well, moving on, I guess. Let's talk about the English dub. So, honestly, this is one of the better English dubs from Aniplex, we think.
I would say it's the best that I've watched personally.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard some decent ones from Aniplex, but this one is definitely one of the better ones, I'd say. Well, I think I'm the only one who's actually watched it through and through, I believe, dubbed.
I did, but that was like a year ago. So
Okay. Honestly, the only one that didn't really fit his role, I felt, was David Vincent as Senketsu. He just didn't have as much impact as what was the original Seiyu? Toshi Toshin. I can't pronounce his name right.
let me help you out. Let me find them. Um, Toshiniko Seki.
Yeah, but otherwise, like Patrick Seitz as just did a perfect job as Gamagori. Um, And Christian Maria Cabanos did she's probably the only person I could see actually being able to do a perfect Mako, or at least a perfect adaptation of Mako. And I'd say Ryuko's took a bit to get used to. Like Erica Mendez, she's a pretty solid voice actress, but it just took a while for me to get used to her as Ryuko. And that being said, Satsuki did a really, Carrie, Carrie did a really good job as Satsuki Kiryuin. Another notes on voice actors is I really liked Ragyo, how they chose Laura Post, mostly because I was kind of rooting for her for the role when they were still announcing who would dub who. But she really matches Rami Park really well with her interpretation of the character. I also feel like Matthew Mercer as Akira Mikisugi, he really matched Shin Ichiro's basically just how well he has the different ranges of voice for the character.
I really
And,
like Matthew Mercer. I don't know if
well,
there's anything I've heard him do that I disliked.
Matt Mercer's one of the greats.
yeah, yeah, he's definitely up there with a lot of the big names like I can't think of any off the top of my head for some
Troy
reason.
Baker, Nolan North.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he's maybe not in that class, but one under.
Well, I hate to put it this way, but I sort of consider Matthew Mercer to almost be kind of like a discount Troy Baker because he actually does do a lot of the voices that Troy Baker does when Troy Baker isn't available, like Kanji Tatsumi in Persona 4 Arena.
And
Yeah.
Sigma in Zero Time Dilemma after Troy Baker voiced him in VLR.
Yep.
But yeah, the dub is really solid. The only, like I said before, the only notch I'd have against it is David Vincent just didn't sound right as Senketsu. I mean, he's still a really good voice actor. It's just he didn't fit the role, I felt.
I agree with that. From what I heard, from what I remember of hearing, I got used to his voice as Senketsu, but it took me a
Yeah,
little bit. And I sort of had the same thing with Ryuko, which you mentioned, where like after a few episodes of hearing it, it was fine, but the initial impression was it at least threw me off. Maybe that's only because I was already used to the Japanese voices. But
well, the thing is, the other voice actresses or the other voice actors all worked really well as their role. Like Patrick Seitz just fit Gamagori perfectly, and same with Christian Maria Cabanas. They all worked really well as their roles. It's just it took some getting used to just simply how Erica felt very different compared to her Seiyu counterpart.
mhm.
At least at the start. Eventually, she fit the role pretty well.
I think there was like sort of a funny thing going on where she sort of figured out how to do the character a little bit better a couple episodes in, and they didn't go back and re-record her earlier lines where maybe they could have and it would have turned out more consistent. Like I felt like there was a moment where she got better.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
what
I
it felt
can't
like
put
to
my
me.
finger on exactly where it was since it's been a while since I watched the dub.
Yeah, I watched it recently.
But
I couldn't quite remember where it was, where she's just started feeling the role a lot better. I'm not sure if there's really anything else to say about the dub other than I really felt like they did a really good job on a lot of the minor characters' voices as well. Like a lot of the one-offs had really good voice acting.
Oh, another thing I just remembered is the blooper reel for the English dub of Kill the Kill is one of the funniest blooper reels that I have ever seen.
Well, a lot of dub blooper reels tend to be pretty funny, I think.
Yeah, but this one's up there. This it deserves a shout out because I was laughing out loud, like basically crying of laughter.
But anyways, so I guess moving on. So let's talk about both the impact the series had, both in the micro and macro aspects of animation, and how does the series fit in its particular genre. First off, let's go with the impact. So the most obvious one is it kind of put Trigger on the map.
Yeah. I would say that's definitely the largest. It kind of gave them their own sort of style, and it showed them that the good old guy next who made Kill la Kill or who made Gurren Lagann, Penny Talking, and that they were still alive in this form.
Yeah. Another impact is it kind of typecasted Trigger a little bit, just a little bit.
Yeah, because they have done other types of things like Eno Battle and
Little Witch Academia.
yeah. I actually haven't seen that. Maybe I'll watch that tonight. But they do sort of have that like Kill la Kill set an expectation for Trigger that they haven't really been able to escape from yet, where everything that they've done since then is being held to the standard of Kill la Kill.
Definitely is a detraction for them because when everyone's comparing something to something as good as Kill la Kill, it's highly
hard
unlikely
to live up to that
Yeah.
any type of consistency.
which it definitely set a very high standard for them that it's just physically impossible to keep with.
Yeah, it's actually almost kind of unfair to expect them to make something like that every time, but you just sort of can't help but hope that the next thing they do is going to be as good.
Yeah, well, did you think there was any? Well, obviously it had a bit of an impact on audiences as well because, like we said before, it's set a standard for Trigger, so it's also set a lot of people who really like this series. Both, well, actually, how popular do you think? Did either of you do any of you know how popular the series was in Japan itself?
I think it did fairly okay. I don't have any type of exact numbers or anything, but that seems to be the general consensus online is that it was fairly popular.
Yeah. Well, it definitely had a bit of an impact on audiences over here as well, where actually, do you think it might be more popular here than it is over there?
That's possible, I'd
It
say.
wouldn't surprise me, but I have no idea.
Much like we mentioned last week on the Devil's a Part-Timer, a big bonus to it is having a good dub and being on Netflix.
Yep.
Oh yeah, I mean I've heard more than one person say like, oh well, is it on Netflix? Oh okay, I'll check it out then. Who like
Yeah,
are very
that's a common
casual.
thing I hear about from people who want to try some anime or something. They are so likely to go for the Netflix show
Yeah,
over something they have to find on Crunchyroll or Funimation or what have you.
my brother doesn't watch anime, but he started watching the show. So
Oh well then maybe we'll see what happens from then on. You know?
So then, I guess moving on from the impact of the show, how would you put it side by side with other series in its genre?
Uh, well what do you think is its genre like?
yeah,
Battle
it-
shonen?
Action.
shonen or parody.
Well, there isn't really much of parody, so something along the lines of an action shonen.
Yeah, it's more a parody in its existence than it is in like actively trying to lampoon its genre.
I kind of think it's one of the better ones. You know,
Yeah.
it's probably I mean I'm trying to think of another action
Well,
show that I like as
Well,
much.
if we're going by action shonen, there's JoJo's Bizarre Adventure.
There's also One Punch Man.
Yeah, those are
Those are basically all I put on its level that I've seen.
yeah. I actually think I think One Punch Man is kind of better than Kill la Kill.
I would agree, but it's of the slightest of margins.
Yeah, it's like Kill la Kill is really good. JoJo initially I didn't think was quite at that level, but the current season.
The first couple seasons, I don't think. Third season got close. Fourth season might be the one that actually. I don't know if it'll catch up to Kill la Kill. I value Kill la Kill very highly, but it's at least in the running.
Yeah, and I mean,
it's not out of the frame of possibility. So
yeah, I think that Kill la Kill is one of the better shows in its genre. It's one of my personal favorite shows.
I would say it's one of the best, and unless you're just naturally predisposed to not like its sort of high octane absurdity, in which case that's the reason rather than any sort of judgment on its quality. I think it's hard to argue that it's not like quality wise one of the best action anime out there.
if you like fast-paced action and don't care too much about the plot of the show, and even if you care about the plot of shows, this is going to be a really nice change of pace for you if you just want to have some fun.
Personally,
And
it's one of my top 5 favorite anime. Even not even in the genre, just favorite anime.
Yeah,
Same here,
it's like
same
it's
here.
like number 3 or 4 for me.
Yeah, It's currently in my, I think, number 3 spot.
Yeah,
I think same for me.
I think it might be in my top 20, though it isn't in my top 10 really. But I'd say
You watch a
it's-
billion anime though.
Yeah, that's true. But I'd say it's definitely a really great comfort food type anime where if you just want something to turn your brain off while still having a really good time with, it's definitely probably one of the higher quality ones to do it.
It's also one that I'm actually surprised both you and Adam like it as much as you do, because this doesn't seem like your style of show. Like, for me, it's obvious. This is basically the exact type of show I want to watch. But, for you guys, Adam straight up said this is not the type of show he usually likes.
Yeah,
And just from what I know of your taste, JJ, it doesn't feel like it's on the same wavelength as most of that stuff either. So I think
Well,
that's also a testament to its overall quality, that it's pulling in people who usually wouldn't care about this sort of show.
it honestly is the type of show that if I knew absolutely nothing about it and you pitched it to me, I would probably say, like, this doesn't sound like something I would enjoy. I don't want to watch this. I mean, I'm trying to remember how I actually came about watching it in the first place, because it really does seem like the type of thing that I wouldn't
Well,
enjoy.
I know
But
me personally, I jumped on the train as soon as I watched the Little Witch Academia short when it was first released, and then I learned about Trigger, so I got really excited when I heard about their new project.
I
I
think
still need to watch the second Little Witch Academia short, even though I have it like on Blu-ray.
I watched Kill la Kill really early in my days of watching anime, and I think I just sort of stumbled upon it because I heard some buzz about it. Like, I heard people talking about it, and I thought I may as well check it out. The last time I did that was Sword Art Online, and that really burned me. So,
Same with me.
but
Yeah, anime's a medium where you do have to be careful about things that are,
Yeah,
super popular, but usually they end up pretty good.
I gave it a shot, and
Lately,
I
at least.
was just I watched the first 2 episodes, and I had no idea what I just watched, but I wanted to see more of it. So, so that's sort of how I got into the show.
yeah. All right. So what are you guys' overall thoughts on Kill la Kill? Do you think it? Well, I suppose. What are you guys' final thoughts on Kill la Kill?
Uh, well, I still feel like I kind of just said them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's probably one of the greatest action anime ever made, and it's also one of the best genre parodies we've seen.
Yeah.
It's just one of those shows that, you know, it's one of those that come along and once in a blue moon, it does something completely unique that's never been done before, even close to what it's done. And it's definitely had an effect on at least Trigger alone, if not the entire genre.
I mean, even Trigger hasn't really done anything exactly
Not
like it yet.
not even close.
No.
But I don't get
yeah.
the feeling they've tried to do anything close yet. We've
Well,
never had their A staff and the budget there together, so.
I don't even know if it would be a good idea.
Yeah, I don't think it would because
I think it would, because Kill la Kill's not the first time they caught this lightning in a bottle. Gurren Lagann was definitely a similar situation, and you could argue Panning and Stocking was. So when they really put their mind to it, I know that's not the exact same studio, but the core group is there at Trigger. So I think they definitely could do this again. I just don't think they've had the right scenario to do it yet.
Well, it might be a while before they actually do because you kind of want to get out of the shadow of Kill la Kill, like have a few more series come along from them before they actually try something as big as Kill la Kill again.
Yeah, I think that.
Yeah, and I think we're getting there. I think you give it 1 or 2 more years, and they're probably another year, and then that's when I really want to see them to handle an original again. and I will be expecting something of the quality that Kill la Kill and Gurren Lagann and its like have set.
Yeah, I feel like it's definitely one of the better action series out there. Like, it's not my personal favorite action series of all time, but if I were to put out a list of action series I generally like, it'd definitely break into the top 5, I feel. It's just such a good turn off your brain flick to watch and just enjoy pretty much. So obviously we've mentioned it before, but I suppose for the side by side series I'm guessing we're all saying Gurren Lagann.
It's hard not to make that comparison because ultimately there's not much else like them around. It's kind of like, I feel like Trigger's the Tarantino of anime, where they just have their own very unique style now, and besides maybe a copycat or a homage here or there, you're not going to see that same sort of deal out of anyone else. So I feel like Gurren Lagann's really the only place to go, it and Panty and Stocking.
Yeah, all I can really think of is Gurren Lagann, because that's pretty much the only series you could put side by side with it and just see the level of quality between both of them.
Plus the same kind of philosophy of we're lampooning popular anime.
And still having a really good time with it, and lots of symbolism in Gurren Lagann.
Yeah, and giving it a bit more of a meaning than just being a lampoon.
Yeah.
It's not Spaceballs the anime.
Yeah.
I would agree with Gurren Lagann. If I were to say okay, well, if you like Kill la Kill, what are 2 other shows you should watch? I would
Gurren Lagann with tits and scissors.
I would say you should watch Gurren Lagann. If you've already done that, watch One Punch Man.
Yeah, I'd also bring up One Punch Man as well. It
would be hard once you've already liked Kill la Kill. I feel like One Punch Man is the easier of the 2 to like because it doesn't have the fan service and the same level of absurdity. It's absurd, but it's more, especially to Westerners, with its kind of root in the superhero, not genre, but ideas. I feel like it's a much more palatable dish to the vast majority of people than Kill la Kill was going in.
Yeah, and if you want just Kill la Kill with a ton more testosterone, go with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure.
That's pretty. Yeah, actually, I think that's actually a really good way to put it. Testosterone is the exact thing that JoJo has over Kill la Kill.
All the muscles.
Kill la Kill, Kill la Kill is very equal opportunity fan service, but there's a lot of ladies with nice bodies in that show. If you want to look at men,
go with JoJo.
And very muscled men who pose very weirdly.
Very muscly men. And even if you're not super into very muscly men, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is also just actually very surprisingly well written and has really lovable characters too.
And for the group who might have gone into Kill la Kill because it was very pretty ladies and very scanty clothing with a lot of crazy high-octane action, High School of the Dead. That's what that show is. You're not going to get any sort of thematic basis out of it or any sort of, kind of unique looks or styles. You're going to get a Madhouse-developed action show with a crazy budget and lots of flying tit physics. But if that sounds like a good time to you, you'll probably enjoy it.
Well, I suppose that's really all we have left to talk about Kill la Kill. So, now then, so my name is, I'll repeat it again, my name is JJ. You can find me as the Journeyman66 anywhere, and I'm usually on Twitter a lot, so you can find me there.
I'm Adam. I'm on Twitter as AdamK678. I'm also on my anime list under the same username.
Yeah, I'm a Sicarion on Twitter, and as well as pretty much anywhere else.
I'm Sorry Jazargo on Twitter, and pretty much everything else, JZARGO.
And, well, that's it for this episode of Blatant Filler, so until next time, see you later. not.
Bow, ba-dow, bow, 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 bow.
We were having good, clean family fun with Kill la Kill.
Guys, if my turtle starts barking, we should all be scared. Well, JJ, we're taking a look at Kill la Kill. It's a big, giant piece of shit. And then I'll get into an argument with you about whether High School of the Dead is a piece of art or meaningless filth.
Absolute
And the
garbage.
answer is both.
High School of the Dead is like one of those paintings that is just a red square on a white background.
Except for there's
art.
2 red squares, and they're not squares, they're nipples.